Hey listeners, I'm not sure I should be sharing this with you, but I mean this is serverless big, pushing serverless to the edge, or in this case, to the cloud. He's an AWS Community Hero, host of Serverless Chats, GM of Serverless Inc. How many more times can I say serverless in this entire podcast? Well, guess what? I won't be off by none, or is it one? Maybe I should do this Mr. Beast style and count how many times we say serverless in this entire podcast. I think I'm up to like 5 now. Okay, listeners, you're not gonna wanna miss this because joining us today is Jeremy Daly, and he's sharing how he got started in the serverless universe, a behind the scenes look at his podcasting setup, and a serverless cloud surprise. Jeremy is talking about the serverless framework, chats, cloud, and did I forget to mention Serverless Inc? Wait. Is that serverless? Seriously, you're not going to want to miss this serverless cloud surprise, but we also do stop talking about serverless just for a little bit as Jeremy walks us through his studio setup and some cool additions that he just added over the holiday break. Take a look at the description below on some of the links for the products that we show throughout the podcast. Now, how about you do the needful, you know, the usual stuff of hit that like, subscribe, and notification. I think it's time we get started. What? We're recording? Shoot. I almost swore on that thing. All right, Jeremy, you ready, man?
Ready to go.
All right, join me in welcoming Jeremy Daly to the show. Jeremy, thanks for joining me.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. It's nice to be on the John Myer podcast.
Jeremy, I really appreciate you joining. I know it's after the holidays here, and you know we were trying to squeeze this in actually before the holidays, but we've had a hectic and busy schedule. Before we jump into a lot of that conversation and talking about serverless podcast, and your recording setup, how about you give those who don't know you a little bit of backstory about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jeremy Daly. So I started a web development company out of my dorm room in 1997. So if you don't think I look that old, I really appreciate it. But I've been doing this for over 24 years now. So it's been a while. But I started a web development company and worked on that for actually 12 years, built that up, eventually sold that off, and then started a startup in like 2009, and then did another startup after that, and then another startup and another startup. And then I ended up here at Serverless Inc. So I am now the GM of Serverless Cloud at Serverless Inc. But I went through sort of an interesting progression. I started with Perl and CGI, way back in the day, made my way into PHP, then eventually Cold Fusion for a little while because one of our customers at the time needed it. So we did that. Then of course Node and all that kind of stuff. But then once we got to about 2009, and AWS and the whole cloud was coming out, things were starting to really roll there. Switched all my energy over to cloud, started building in cloud, and then serverless around 2015, and been doing that ever since.
Some of the website development that you did way back then, is any still up? I'm curious.
If you use the Wayback Machine, you can probably find it. But yeah, I mean, we were building stuff when, I originally started with, this site or this software called Hot Dog. It was like, and you had to like embed it, it was like, this was like right at the beginning of JavaScript too. So like, in order to do rollovers and stuff, you were like embedding it in the, on mouse overs and things like that. It was wild times back then.
I remember creating some of those websites for mouse over hover. You moved over, it did its thing. All right, so now we're
switch out the image source and stuff like that.
Yeah. I remember dating way back in college time. Okay, we won't go away.
right. Well, just forget about that era at all, because it was that was Web 1.0, I guess, right? That was that was rough times back then.
Oh, now we're calling it 1.0, 2. We're in 2, 3.
I don't know. Well, now we're doing 3, maybe 4 is coming out. Who knows? It's hard to keep up with these things.
I'm going to claim the domain like Web 27. So when we get there, we're good to go.
Right. And at this rate, we'll probably be there pretty soon too. So.
Well, you started your career way early, and that kind of jump-started some of the things. But I see a progression. You developed websites. You talked about AWS, you're playing around that, and then you got into serverless. Let's talk serverless. When did you really get into that and start development? Because that's really what you're doing now, and that's a lot of what the community kind of knows you for.
Yeah. Well, so interesting how I got into serverless. So again, using cloud, and the startup that I went to after one of the startups I was working on, that started in cloud. I'm working on this startup. We were already using things like DynamoDB, right? So an S3. So these things existed before serverless existed, right? Serverless really kind of became a thing once AWS Lambda launched in early 2015. So it was somewhere around there, probably like 2004, end of 2014, maybe beginning of 2015. And the company I was working for, we had a shopping app, and we were featured on the Today Show. And I remember we had so many meetings. Most of our development team was in Finland. I was in the US, but we were collaborating. We're like, hey, we're ready to go, right? We got everything set to go. We were doing scaling tests, like just making sure everything scales up, no problem, ready to go. And then we get announced. They start talking about us on this on the Good Morning America, the Today Show. I can't even remember which one it was, but one of those morning shows. And immediately we go from like maybe averaging four or five signups per minute to 10,000 signups in like 30 seconds. And the problem is that our entire authentication system was based on a MySQL database, and it couldn't handle the scale, right? So basically it started locking rows and getting all messed up. And then even existing users couldn't sign in because the database was down. So the rest of the platform was perfectly fine. All of our product information was sharded across databases, and we had DynamoDB, but it was caching collections and all kinds of things that was working perfectly, but you couldn't sign up or sign into the app, which was the big problem. So after that, we had a big, sort of retrospective, and we were looking around at like, what are the other options to, mitigate something like this? And of course, we could have used DynamoDB. There's a million different things we could have done. But as I was poking around in the AWS console, I came across this thing called Lambda with a little new, little new tag on it. So I'm like, okay, what's this? And again, back then I was not in the reinvent. I wasn't doing reinvent. I wasn't in the space at all. So, so I click on the link and I start reading what this thing is. I start playing around with it. Now, this is before it had API gateway. This is before it had VPC, so you couldn't connect to relational databases with it. I mean, this was like super early, really limited, but I started playing around with it, and I immediately connected this idea of saying, okay, this is the biggest problem that I've had since the day I started writing code, was that as soon as you start getting more traffic, or the app becomes more complex, or whatever it is, that you start just creating all these layers where things can go wrong, right? And then it's like, if I want to, I'll just give you this example of even before this other startup. The first startup I worked in, we actually sort of had a serverless architecture using something called Gearman to do these app servers behind the scenes. So it dispatched jobs basically asynchronously to do something, because we were splitting up like image processing servers from just regular application servers. So we had to decide, how are we going to scale up image processing? And we had to, of course, deploy VMs for those. So we had like 3 image processing machines, but then we needed like 10 app machines. And then we needed a bunch of different database servers and things like that. So we were already starting to break the app up, because we were just noticing you can't stick one app onto one server and just expect it to keep growing. And if you start splitting that up into multiple servers, and you have the same app with everything running on the same servers, across all these different VMs, and you're just, load balancing or whatever, you still run into this problem where, in order for any one of those machines to do something specific, you might have to scale up all of your machines just to handle one process, which doesn't make any sense. So this idea of taking a particular process, a very, very small, discrete piece of business logic, and separating that out and saying, this runs independently, I can scale up to 1 million, or just have it run once every 3 days, or whatever it is that I want to. I immediately saw something there. I'm like, if this could expand where this execution environment could connect to your databases, could be accessed via HTTP call, could be used as a background processing task or whatever, there's something magical there. So as soon as I sort of discovered that, I was like, I'm all in on this, and I just was like laser focused and watching the space to see what happened.
All right. So what was the outcome? Did you actually redesign it utilizing Lambda in order to? I thought you were leading up to that whole big thing.
Well,
like, I found this awesome thing, Lambda. It was great. It was wonderful. And here you're gonna
Yeah.
leave me hanging.
Well, yeah. So this is, if anybody's been on a development team, you probably know how these conversations go. Is like, what are the chances of us getting featured on this again and having to deal with that amount of scale? And it was one of those trade-offs. Like, do we redesign our entire authentication system using serverless or some other system, or do we just say, we got lucky with that major, release, but under normal circumstances, we could scale and handle plenty of loads on a regular basis. So we decided, as a team, that we would not implement a new solution at that point. And then, of course, we never got to that. Then I ended up leaving and went to another startup anyways. But yeah, so I wish there was a success story there of like, we discovered this new thing. But at that time, actually, Lambda was a little bit early, right? So it wasn't until later in 2015 that API Gateway came out that allowed you to do the HTTP requests. It was at least another year, if not more than that, when they enabled VPC access and you could actually connect to like relational databases. So there was, or even caching. I mean, that was one of the big things for us is we did end up redesigning one of our product catalogs that was running off of a Cassandra ring. We redesigned that to use Lambda as the primary interface for the gateway. So we had API Gateway, or for the API. So we had API Gateway connecting to that. And then eventually, once they released VPCs, then we were able to connect it to Redis cache and use Redis cache as a sort of a in-memory cache before we were hitting the Cassandra ring on every call. So that actually worked really, really well. Of course, VPCs were a little bit slow back then, but everything has gotten better. So so we did eventually use it, not to solve the problem though that we originally had, which was the reason why I was looking for it.
Interesting how you say we decided that as a team.
Right. It's not my decision. It was not my vote, but sometimes
I'm not calling anybody out. We all decide, and it's probably a valid reason. Do we spend X amount of dollars reinventing it? Is this ever going to happen again? Though you should plan that it will happen again, because if it was successful or you learn something from it. In fact, you probably took that knowledge you learned and applied it to other startups or other things that you're doing and utilizing. And how else did you get to, serverless chats, Serverless Inc. And now let's actually talk about what you're doing now. You just rounded a year there, correct?
Yeah, actually just over a year. Yeah, my LinkedIn, I think, was just my LinkedIn anniversary was just in January, but I technically started at the end of November of 2020. I don't know. I don't remember years anymore. Yeah, so I've been there for about a year and 2 months or so at this point.
Okay, so LinkedIn lied because I liked it or said, hey, congratulations. So I was late to the party, but that's all right. I think everybody was.
That's fine.
All right. So what are you doing right now at Serverless Inc? I mean, I know you're the GM of it. I know Serverless chats that you're doing the podcast. I want to talk about it all. So how did you get to this job, this role, and how did Serverless chats come out of it?
Yeah, well, so Serverless Chats predates my employment at Serverless Inc. So like I said, in 2015, I started playing around with Lambda. I was already well into the cloud and pretty much doing everything in the cloud, which was a complete game changer at the time. And so when I started playing around with Lambda, I was building some things with it and I was reading some, blog posts, which there weren't a lot about. And I just started reading content and trying to, see what was going on. And then I think about 2018, so this was a while after, sort of a while after I started with Serverless, but I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm doing enough with this now. I was building all kinds of different things with it. I actually started playing around with building some open source projects and things like that. And I said, I'm going to put a blog post up. I had a blog before, but I was talking about like product management and other things that I was doing. I was the VP of product at another startup. And so I was doing some things with that. But I ended up just writing a post about serverless security. And then I wrote another post and then I wrote another post. And then next thing you know, people are contacting me and, my Twitter, Twitter's kind of going crazy. And then next thing you know, I end up on, I wrote a post about all the different serverless patterns that I was using. And then that sort of became sort of a big thing. And now there's a serverless patterns on the serverless land that AWS maintains. But I just started building all these different things. And then I started working on more open source projects and doing all this stuff. And then next thing you know, I'm on the board to do Serverless Days Boston. And, just things started kind of getting crazy. Somebody said like, hey, why don't you come to reInvent? So I ended up going to reInvent in 2018. And then the next thing you know, it's like, I'm a serverless hero. And, and I had started my off by none. Oh, if you can see it here, my off by none. I was looking in the camera and pointing to the wrong place. My off by none newsletter started that in September of 2019. think it was 2019. Yeah, 2009, no, 2019, 2018. I can't even remember. Anyways, I started that and just sharing all of the posts and all of the cool information that was coming out from the serverless space. So I started sharing that. And one of the things I did was every week I call out Serverless Star. So I recognize somebody in the community that is doing cool stuff, whether it's open source or just writing blogs or contributing in some way or just doing cool stuff. So I try to call somebody out every week. But anyway, so that just grew. And then I started going to conferences. I went to reInvent. And then next thing you know, we ran our own conference. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. And then eventually I started the podcast. And then I sort of, when the pandemic hit, I was doing a bunch of consulting. I was just winding down another startup that I was working on. And so I started doing more consulting and just being in the space, working on the podcast, working on the newsletter. And then Austin Collins came to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" Because we kind of have this idea and we want to execute on it. And I said, it seems like a great idea. It was sort of the right time, right place sort of thing. So I joined them and started working on this thing we call Serverless Cloud. So if you're familiar with Serverless Inc., you're probably more familiar with the Serverless framework. So the Serverless framework is the open source tool that Austin and a few people started, I think in like 2015, 2016, like it was right after Lambda came out. So it was very early. And essentially that is an easy way for you. It's a infrastructure as code framework, but very simple for you to build serverless applications and deploy them to AWS and a few other providers. And that is keep going. Actually, today we just launched version 3 of it, which is very, very cool. Great team over there that's building the serverless framework. And then the serverless framework also has a component called the serverless dashboard, which is just for monitoring and like controlling parameters and helping you do deployments and those sort of things. So that's sort of a commercial side of it. But one of the things that we found, or one of the things that Serverless Inc. found with the framework was there's a big drop off of people who try to build a serverless application and then have to create an AWS account. And as soon as you get into that AWS environment, especially if you don't come from cloud, it's overwhelming. I mean, 200 products on the console page. I mean, the IAM permissions and what do I have to grant access to? And I'm putting my credit card in and how much are they going to charge me and all that kind of stuff. So what we wanted to do with Serverless Cloud was actually create our own platform. It runs on AWS right now, but essentially what it is it's a platform to get you started very quickly. No credit card or anything. You just basically sign in with your GitHub or your Google, and then you're in, and you immediately have a development environment that you can start building applications with. So that's what my team has been working on for the last year or so, and we launched it in public preview back in October. It's been going strong now. We've added a bunch of features and sort of been listening to customer feedback. So yeah, so Serverless Cloud right now is this really cool thing where you just go and there's no infrastructure as code. It's like simple API.get or schedule.every or data.set. I mean, it's so easy to use. It's all JavaScript, TypeScript, super familiar, especially for front-end developers. And that's it. You just type deploy and you have a magical serverless application up and running. So that's what I'm doing now. I don't know if you want me to talk more about.
No, hold on a second. Let me
stop.
Crap. Oh my God. I don't know. There was just so much that you just unloaded there. I don't know how to, I'm going to let you drink because I got questions. Okay. First of all, to talk about what you were doing. Okay. Serverless chats came up before Serverless Inc., right? So you kind of like develop. Okay. I didn't know that. And I think recently I only started following you. I think it was back in September, October. I don't know if you can find the following status. Please don't look. No, I'm just kidding. So I saw you actually posting some of that and I was like, oh man, some of this information is really cool. He's out there with the community. By the way, I like it that you call out the community once a week and you really kind of put somebody out there or some of the work that they're doing. That's really cool. Keep that up. The newsletter you're doing, Off by None, I like that when I see that come up. Most of the time I see that in LinkedIn before I see that in the Twitter. I'm not sure. I think Twitter hides you.
Sign up in your email. You'll see it in your email box before.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you want to get that.
You know what? I actually, damn, a call out. Crap. All right. So anyway, congratulations on all the serverless stuff. You said you hosted a serverless event or in Boston.
Yeah, Serverless Days Boston 2000.
Is that for AWS?
No, well, so Serverless Days is its own little, I don't want to say little. I mean, there's been hundreds of conferences around the world. Okay. Ann Stanley and Paul, blanking on names now, Paul Johnston and somebody else, I think, started this server. It's called JeffConf originally, and it was just like this little thing in London with people talking about serverless. And then it kind of exploded from there, and people started doing it all over the world. So there's been like Tokyo, there's been all over the United States, all over Europe. I think there's one in Japan. Well, Japan was Tokyo. Yeah, I think there's a couple in China. There's a whole bunch of them going on around the world. And of course, they were really buzzing until the pandemic hit and it kind of all went virtual. But there's just sort of a worldwide, organization that just, they're all community conferences, and they're usually small. There's usually like 200, 300 attendees, right? They're not giant, but they were great. And that they're just talking all about serverless. So I was on the board for one. We did Serverless Boston. I want to say it was 2019. It must have been 2019. Yeah. So we did the 2019 Serverless Boston. It was great. We had some really great speakers and probably 250 attendees. And yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about where you're at now. And you say you released version 3, right, of Serverless Cloud?
That's the serverless framework. And again, not to confuse people, I'm not on the framework team. So we have multiple teams at Serverless Inc.
Okay. There's so much information about you, Jeremy.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to sign you up for a second one, and I'm doing it on recording because you can't really say no.
Okay.
Okay. So version 3 of the framework was released. Let's talk about Serverless Cloud, because I know that wasn't really one of our topics, but you brought that up, and I find it cool on how you can connect to it. What are some of the limitations? What can I do with it right now? And then really, how do I sign up? How do I get started? And by the way, they are not a sponsor of this, but if you want to, let me know. Go ahead.
Yeah. So to sign up, you just go to cloud.serverless.com or serverless.com/cloud. Either one will get you there. But essentially, what it is again, you just sign in with your GitHub or your or with your Google account, and it just gives you this environment now that you can start building in. So if you are, and again, it's TypeScript and JavaScript right out of the box. So you don't need to do any fancy TypeScript conversions or ES builds or anything. We do it all for you. But essentially, you just use your local development machine. So if you're using your IDE, VS Code, or whatever, right in the terminal, you just type in npm init cloud, and it literally spins up an application for you, populates your local directory, connects you to a remote instance. And then the coolest thing is that as you save stuff locally, you don't need to run anything locally. Every time you save, it automatically uploads to a developer sandbox, and then you get a live URL that you can test against. And when I say automatically, or I should say instantaneously, it's like less than a second. So it deploys infrastructure, does everything that it needs to do. You don't even have to think about it. It just does that, and then you just have a live application. And then when you're ready to say, hey, I want to put this into production, you type deploy production, and it will go ahead and spin up an entirely new thing, isolated, its own data, its own storage, its own APIs. It's super cool. Like I mean, I don't want to spend the whole podcast explaining what it does. Honestly, just go try it out, and hopefully you'll be wowed by it. But essentially, the idea is that the limitations are that we are very specific about what types of use cases you can do with it. So we have API, an API use case. We have data, built-in data, and we have storage. But you can also, it has like built-in parameters. Secrets management is already kind of done for you, and then it also has the ability to extend it, though. So if you want to use like an AWS service with it, you can just put in your AWS credentials in our secrets manager, and then use those and connect through the API to AWS, or you can connect to MongoDB, or you can connect to whatever you want to do. You have the ability to do that. So there are some limitations. Again, it runs backed by Lambda, right? So we have a limited environment in terms of how fast it can run or how long it can run for. But really, the cool thing is there's no infrastructure as code. There's no YAML. There's no configuration. It literally reads your code and determines from your code what type of infrastructure you need, and then automatically deploys that for you. So we call that infrastructure from code as opposed to infrastructure as code. It's really cool, and it's awesome. I mean, I literally don't want to use anything else to develop serverless applications now.
IFC, infrastructure from code, or so.
Right.
So, all right, I'm coining that term. Does that have anything to do with the post that you shared out on Twitter the other day? You were like, these 4 lines of code deploy out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That makes total sense. Okay, everybody, you got to go try this out. I really find it cool that you get to play around with it, spins it up, try it out, put down in the comments below what you think. We'll give Jeremy some feedback. Anything that you want to do. I'm really curious about it. So Jeremy, I'm going to switch gears real quick before we get to some of your podcasting stuff. Something I didn't prep you for. Are you ready?
Sure.
I got some speed questions for you.
Okay. I will do my best.
They're going to be challenging. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What's your favorite color?
Oh, orange.
Okay. What's your favorite AWS service?
DynamoDB.
Man, I was actually going to think Lambda. Okay. All right. I think I know. I actually thought I knew the answer to that. Okay. Next one. And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. Mac or PC?
Oh, Mac.
All right.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite movie?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. It used to be Shawshank Redemption way back in the day. That was a good one.
You could always watch it, but they never did a sequel. You ever notice that? You don't know how things end up. It's an assumption. Anyway, what is it? How about you said back in the day? What's your new one?
Recent movie that I really like. I don't know. You know what actually I really liked, and maybe this is because I have kids. I mean, they're 13 and 15 now, but the new version of Jumanji, the one with is it The Rock or whatever it is? Welcome to the Jungle or something like that. I actually thought that was hilarious. I was really nervous that when they do all these remakes, but that one was different enough that I was like, yeah, I like it.
So that one has a little bit of a nostalgia because Robin Williams, I love the original one, and he's always played a huge part of a lot of the movies I've listened to and watched too. Did you watch both?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. I did not watch number 2. Don't spoil it. Sorry. No spoiler.
Yeah. Well, watching number 2 will spoil it enough for you. So.
Okay. All right.
It was all right. It was all right.
It was just all right. Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you another question, but we'll move on. Let's talk. Actually, no, I know which one. And it was based off some of your posts you did. I think it was like 2 months ago. What is your favorite drink?
I mean, it's hard to, it's hard not to love a good old fashioned. I'm a big bourbon fan, so I have a lot of bourbon and single malt scotches. That probably sounds like, you know,
what's your bourbon?
Favorite is Basil Hayden right now.
Okay.
Yeah, but Knob Creek,
I don't mind Knob Creek. I have Bradford.
Four Roses even. I mean, you know, yeah. Four Roses, by the way, was the bourbon that Paulie would drink in the first Rocky movie.
Let's just jump back. You and I kind of, I reached out to you right when I kind of hit reInvent, right? And I was like, hey, you want to grab a quick picture? And you and I think we played tag for about 4 days until like the last day on the expo. Like, hey, I'm over at the Hero Lounge. If you want to come over, and I was like, wow, that actually works out for me. So we squeezed in a quick picture, and we were talking about some of the things you're doing for your podcast setup as well. You were talking about some gear, a new setup that you were trying to still install. Did you get it done? And let's talk about it.
I did. Well, I got most of it done. So I don't know if I can. So, well, one of the things is so here's my mic. It's just a Shure, and I have it on a boom here. And then what I do is I have a 60. I think this is the 6400, the Sony A6400 for this. And I actually have. What's that?
That's what I'm running.
I have a 6400 and a 6600 too. So, anyways, that's for my handheld stuff. But I actually ended up creating a whole. I've got a teleprompter, and I've got a Lilliput monitor for that does that, and it's all connected to my computer. And then I ended up trying all these different things, like a stand attached to the side of my desk, and then I had like these arms off of it, and I had this massive thing, and like you walk into my office, and like if my desk is also my desk automatically goes up and down. I have a standing desk here that will automatically go up and down, so I can stand and whatever, and I can adjust the height of stuff. But like I have like a ceiling fan, and like sometimes it would get too close. So I ended up finding this really great solution where I took this small tripod and I mounted it to this like big metal disc that I had that was actually used for like a trade show stand, and I put it on my desk with some felt pads underneath it, and now my camera is just on my desk, and I can slide it. I can slide it around on my desk, and I can adjust the height if I need to there, or I can adjust it from the standing desk. But so anyway, so now I've got this great thing here, and this is probably going to be super messy. There's some tissues over there.
That's all right.
I've got some lights over there. I've got these what are they called? The Elgato lights or whatever they are, or Elgato and whatever the name is there. So I have those, and those do the lighting there. And then I've added some pretty cool features. I don't know if I can pick this up, but so I have this hair light that is now on this extending arm that comes out from my wall. And then I actually, I have all these.
Don't worry, we can see it.
There, I got all these backdrops now that are motorized, so I can bring those backdrops down. And then my desk is also on casters, so I can move my desk around my office and set up different shots. So if I turn it this way, then I've got all those backdrops behind me. I've got the lighting, I can adjust this. And then of course, I've got my camera that I can move around on this big desk here. And I just record straight to my computer. So I don't have to worry about putting it on a camera card and then transferring it and doing all that stuff.
Could you send me a picture of the stand that you have for your
Yes.
camera? I am interested. I think that is cool because it's sliding around nicely. Mine's on a post that's actually mounted to my desk. It is.
You can't move it.
Right? I can't.
Right.
I can only go like this, but I would love something that I can go like that. Now, off to my side, I'll have to send you a picture. I actually built this case for my ATEM Mini. It's actually in a hard case, a Pelican case, and it was off a DSLR's thing. I built my own version of it, and I've got a monitor, a screen mounted into it. But on top of that, I have a GoPro for a side view that I use.
Oh, nice. Yep.
So I'm using my capture card for that because I want two separate inputs, and I don't want to switch my ATEM back and forth. I want them both at the same time, and you get the same view. But I'm curious about that. And you said, what was the other Sony you have? The 6600?
I got the 6600. Yeah. So I did this crazy thing where I'm like, hey, I should get one of these. I should get one of these Ronin S's so that I have the, so that I have the. I don't know, so you turn it on here. I don't know if the battery's still working, but basically I was like, yeah, I definitely need a gimbal. Like, who doesn't need a gimbal, right? So anyway, so I ended up buying this thing, which is amazing, by the way. It's a little heavy, but like, so I've got this camera mounted to it. I ended up going with the Sony, it's a f1.6 maybe, f4 at 18 to 105 zoom lens, optical zoom.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about it is it's a fixed lens length, so that it does inside. So on the gimbal, it doesn't affect the balance as you zoom and whatever. So I ended up doing that. I don't do a lot. I have not done a lot with these with any of the handheld stuff, but I also have I've got like the track thing, like the smooth track and some of those other things. And and I don't know, I just bought random lights recently. I got this light recently, which is pretty cool. It's a IVISII G2, which it does all these different colors. So it's got all the different colors that you can do. And then it's got all these different cool modes. So you can do, it's got a fire truck mode. It's got an ambulance mode, a police mode, but then it also has, if I can figure out how to get there. Here we go. I don't know. I can't even figure out how to turn this thing to the right thing. But
dude,
anyways,
you got to send me the link to that. I want to share it. I'm getting it.
Why can I not change? Oh, here we go. Right. So you can just have it do, I'm probably blinding you here. You can just change, you can just have it do different colors. So you can just have it, different, whatever. And then it's got an RGB mode where you can change the color, go through the color wheel and have that change to whatever you want and adjust all the different things. So anyways, I have this. And part of the reason why I bought this was so that on one of my backgrounds, on my gray background, I can, or on the white background, I can actually, change the color of the background with a bright, whatever. So I know I got all kinds of videos coming out, but I know the other thing you wanted to mention was this. This is the most important piece of equipment that I have.
Okay. First of all, let me give a little bit of backstory. We're sitting here, we're prepping for it, and Jeremy pulls up this card. He's, I don't wonder how my lighting is, and I'm like, what is that? And I hate to sound like an entire noob, but this is how we learn. Man.
I find out new things all the time. How did I not know that existed? How did I not know hair lights were a thing for the longest time? I knew about 3-point lighting since I was a kid, and I worked at an access station, but I'm like, hair light? That's new. That seems like an interesting thing.
I'm not sure I want one of those, but anyway.
Well, no, it's, so first of all, this, so this is just 18% gray. I think this is 18% gray, or maybe I always thought maybe that one was 18% gray, but essentially this is just a color card, which is consistent. So basically the problem is that if I hold up, if I'm like, oh, use my I don't know, my eyeball is the white, like it's not going to be actual white, and neither is the background or anything like that. So this way you hold this in your shot, you record this, and then in post you have a consistent way of adjusting the white balance in order to get it right. And then if your camera has auto white balance, then holding up something like this and it focuses on that will automatically white balance. So your skin tone will be the right color, and you won't have weird, you won't be too orange or too washed out or whatever. So yeah, this is a super important thing to have here. And then the hair light, again, the idea of the hair light is it doesn't matter too much because it's bright in my background now, but on a darker, when it's darker out, and I actually have, I guess I should show you this as well. Let me see if I can do this quickly. So I have these 2 giant windows in my office, which are absolutely amazing. The problem is that they lend a lot of sunlight. So I installed these a while back, these darkening curtains that are automatic. So I can just take a while to go down. But anyway, so I have these installed so I can actually darken the room pretty significantly. But what the hair light does is you shine it just on the top of your head, just kind of on the back of your shoulders. And then that way, when it's a little bit darker in the background, or you've got something subtle in the background, it just kind of makes you pop a little bit. So it separates you from the background and keeps you away from it. So just something, again, I watch a lot of YouTube videos on this stuff. I'm fascinated by them. So I just keep buying things I'm like, oh yeah, that'll make everything better if I just buy more equipment, right?
All I envision is the lights coming down and I Am Legend when he's closing it inside the house before the zombies and everything.
Oh, right.
He's locking down. Right. That's like you did the white balance. Keep in mind, I was actually going to paint this gray white, right? I was the day before I had the paint in my office, and I'm talking to a podcasting buddy. And he's like, no, you don't want to do that. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, no, he goes, the white balance of your camera, it's not going to shine. You got to go dark. You got to go like a dark gray. So I'm showing him some. I was literally going to paint that day. I was ready to go, rip down. This was a weekend thing that I was ripping down. I spackled it. By the way, the house that I bought, I realized why I had a whiteboard, one of those Klingon whiteboards, is because they had this as the dart room.
Oh, there you go.
I had to do a lot of spackling. But anyway, that's why I chose gray. Now I understand with the card, the gray, the white balance, all the lighting stuff, everything. I learn as I go. And the feedback I get from other podcasters, like, no, do this. Or you might want to look at this or try this out. And it's a trial and error. Now, you don't have to start out with all this equipment. You can start out with like a 1080 webcam. Just make sure. One of the things I learned is audio is key. Get yourself a good mic. Yep. Other than that, people will forgive you for video quality.
Yep. I totally agree. I started my podcast just with audio, and I think the audio on my original podcast were pretty good. I do a lot of music stuff as well, and a lot of music recording. So the audio side of things I was pretty good on. I had a GXL 3000. And of course I had to use it through an AD converter and get it in. And there were some issues that I had there with sometimes the mic was too hot, and there wasn't like a built-in compressor. And so like if you recorded too hot or too low, whatever, sometimes there's some issues. But eventually I started doing video, and what I did is I just used my Logitech 1080p or whatever the heck it was, which was terrible. But I used that to start with and just had it on top of my, my monitor. And then eventually I was like, I'm going to get a better camera and whatever. But what I did do, and this is something you see on every podcast out there and pretty much everything that's going on, every time you see one of these Shure mics, you always see I forget which one it's called. This one is the MV7, is the S, I think it's the SV7 or whatever the one is that has the little XLR thing that comes out. So I had XLR, that's what my GXL 3000 was. I had XLR going into that AD converter. And again, if you balance it and like, if I had a better converter and I could do, had meters on it and some other things, I probably would have stuck with that. But I wanted a microphone that I could control with my software. And so this plugs in, it has XLR, so you can do XLR, but also has USB, and the USB on this is really, really, really good. And then you have this awesome thing where you've got a compressor, you've got the ability to adjust the volume and some of those other things. You can see the levels, so you can really get your audio where it needs to be. And the only issue with this microphone when you buy it out of the box was the windscreen. So the windscreen that comes with it, you get a little bit of a pop. So what you do is you just go and you buy the replacement windscreen for the SM, I think it's the SM7, that might be what it is. Anyways, for the SM7 or whatever the high-end one is, which is like, costs you like $14 or whatever it is, and you use that one instead, and it fits on there, and you get rid of that pop, so I can, and you don't get those plosives. So pretty cool. And it's a nice buttery tone, right? Like it's not, it's not tinny like you normally get out of like, I mean, like the Blue Yeti and things like that. Sometimes those get a little tinny. So
the Blue Yeti is a beast. That thing is,
it's also huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Try traveling with that. So I actually took my Rode out to reInvent. I had a full-on setup in my hotel room.
Nice.
I actually had the ice bucket. I took my 6400 on a tripod. I had this in front of it plugged. I had everything ready to go so I could smack my laptop down, do my stuff. I did 2 recordings a day, hammering them out. Like, trust me, I try to travel light, but the audio quality was what I was looking at. I was like, I wasn't actually going to take my camera too. I was like, you know what? I'm going to use my iPhone. And then I was like, no, I can set this up. I used my iPhone with a Movi rig. So a video rig that I was carrying around. It wasn't a gimbal, right? But it allowed me to hold it steady out. And it allowed me to like kind of really move around with it freely without trying to hold your phone. You know how you're like on your pinky and like, oh my God, this is annoying. But this is pretty cool, man. A great conversation all around, not only on what you've done.
Can I give you one more pro tip, or give your listeners one more pro tip if you're thinking about doing?
You can give as many as you like. In fact, I was going to ask you, what else you got?
This is the best thing that I figured out is I was getting a ton of echo in my office because I have mostly solid walls and the windows and whatever. I ended up putting a rug down, which helped dramatically. But the cheapest fix, you just take a bath towel and you put it on your desk under your mic stand, if you got a mic stand or just whatever. And that just prevents that little bit of audio bouncing on, a little bit of reverberation off of the desk. And it helps dramatically.
Are you serious?
And you just use a bath towel. Simple.
Okay. Our next recording, I'm getting a bath towel and putting it down. I want you to tell me the difference between my audio now and the audio then. We'll listen to it just before. Maybe we'll play a clip. That is a cheap pro tip. I mean, you can't get that stuff. Well, you don't even have to buy it. Just go up and you get something.
Right, just grab it right out of your bathroom. No problem.
That's some cost saving tips right there.
Yep.
In fact, that's a serverless tip. Jeremy, I really appreciate you joining. Folks, this was pretty cool. This is awesome. Jeremy Daly, GM of Serverless Cloud at Serverless Inc. Jeremy, thanks for joining me here on the podcast. I can't wait till we can do this again.
Awesome. Thanks, John. It was great being here.
Yeah. Great. Actually,
the funny thing is when I'm on the other side of it, I was like, it's great having you, but I'm on the opposite side. So let me say that again. It was great being here. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Wait. Are you saying you would like me on your show? Of course.
I mean, listen, you know what? Right. Yes, you accept. Okay, perfect. We'll pencil you in.
I'm putting you straight up on the spot twice, recording everything. Don't worry. You're not obligated to this, but the listeners might be looking for me. No questions.
All right.
All right, Jeremy, thank you so much. And until next time, because guess what, folks? We're out of here.